So welcome everybody, and a big welcome to Dr. Sampadananda Ji Mishra from
Namaskar to all of you.
Namaskar, Namaste from Pondicherry or Puducherry. And I'd like to just introduce, and I'm going to read it because there's a lot of things I wouldn't want any of you to miss. All the wonderful things that Dr. Mishra has done and is. And we've had the wonderful occasion to meet with him and co-convene a Birthing the New Humanity event on how to create conscious humanity, starting at the very beginning of life. And we're delighted and honored to have Sampananda Ji with us here today. So Dr. Sampananda Mishra is passionate about Sanskrit. He strongly believes that Sanskrit has immense potentiality to elevate human consciousness to sublime heights. Dr. Mishra has spoken at various conferences, seminars, literary and religious festivals, both nationally and internationally, on Sanskrit, Indian culture, yoga, and education. Dr. Mishra has founded and launched the first ever 24-hour Sanskrit radio called Divyavani, if I said it correct, Sanskrit Radio, and is single-handedly managing the entire content since its inception in 2013. Wow. In the year 2014, Dr. Mishra founded Sanskriti, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to say this,
Bala Sahitya Parishad.
Exactly. That's what I meant to say.
Okay.
With the aim of creating, evaluating, and propagating children's literature in Sanskrit. He has written several books, The Wonder That Is Sanskrit, Sanskrit and the Evolution of Human Speech, Sri Aurobindo in Sanskrit, and Hasimanjari. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, right.
Fantastic. So welcome, Sampananda Ji. We're looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Namaskar to all of you. And sometimes when my bio note is read out in any session, so it always looks that I'm an odd man out in many conferences. But I have my interest in various things. And prenatal education has been part of my life, the kind of research and the insights that I draw from the ancient Indian knowledge system and from other spiritual masters in India, and especially Sri Aurobindo and the mother. So I have been working in this field for last 20 years. And we have a website, mothersglow.in. Sometimes you all can visit to see the kind of content that we are creating. But the whole idea is by prenatal, we give more focus on prenatal education than prenatal care. Okay. So most of the times when we are talking about this birthing the new humanity or conscious humanity or prenatal, anything in the name of prenatal. So what many people are doing wonderful things, but most of the things are concentrated or focused on the care part. So how do we have an easy childbirth, or you say breastfeeding, prenatal and postnatal care, parenting, and nutrition. So all these aspects and different kinds of therapies we find with regard to the childbirth, right? So when we concentrate on that, which is fine and which is very much necessary, and the world has made immense progress in such fields, but that's just taking care of one part of our existence, which is the physical existence. But when we contemplate on ourselves, the whole humanity, we look at the deeper side of it, we find that physical existence is just one part of our existence. So we need to take care of the entire existence. So when we are concentrated, this beautiful concept, which Julian, Francois, and few others who have come out with, and this whole family has been created under the banner of birthing the new humanity. So here, the purpose is not just taking care of the physical existence, but all layers of our existence. And then it becomes possible truly to manifest or materialize this new humanity. So for that, what kind of understanding we should have, from what line of action we should have, so then we have a clear understanding of what we mean by birthing the new humanity or a conscious humanity, what kind of right education that we can bring into this field of man-woman relationship and the childbirth. Okay, we have a beautiful saying in Sanskrit. It says, Ahara nidra bhayamaithunancha samanyametat pashubhir naranam. I will explain you. So it may sound Greek and Latin to some, but it may make no sense, but I'll explain you. It says like ahara means food, nidra, sleep, bhaya, fear, all kinds of apprehension, maithuna, this copulation. So all these are samanya, means in general, it's common with the animals and with the men also. So with the human beings also, like the animals do take food, the animals do sleep, animals do, the copulation and everything that happens with the animals, there is a lot of commonality. But what makes the humanity different, human beings different from the animals? He said dharma. What is dharma? And dharma itself is a vast topic. We are not going to enter into that topic, but dharma. In order to understand how should we move ahead with birthing the new humanity, it is necessary for all of us to understand what makes us different from the other creatures. And what is that dharma? Then understanding the core essence of dharma and organizing every aspect of our life around that central aspect of dharma, creating a kind of discipline and following it strictly, whether we are married, not married, we are planning to have a child, not planning to have a child, or how we are living or wish to lead our life, but dharma has to be at the center. So this is where we need much education for ourselves, so then we can move rightly. So living is not the very aim of our life, because anyone lives. Mere living is not the very purpose of life, purpose of our birth. But we live rightfully and we live beautifully. We live purposefully. So where is that? What we need to do to live rightly? To live rightly doesn't mean just we are just living, but there is a greater responsibility on every one of us. How do we take forward this whole existence of ourselves? Because we are not alone, no one is alone, we all are so interconnected. So how to establish that interconnectivity, and how do whatever I am, how do I extend myself to take forward my own existence, lives after lives? When we are talking about lives after lives, we are again talking about the birth, the rebirth. Rebirth is not something, it has nothing to do with some reward or punishment. It is a process. It is a process, it is all about our evolutionary journey. Because this whole creation is evolutionary in its nature. You want it, you don't want it, evolution goes on. Expansion of our consciousness, it goes on and it will go on. But how to participate in this evolutionary journey consciously and accelerate the whole process of evolution, which is slow when we talk about nature's evolution, is all about the spirituality, is all about yoga, is all about education. The purpose of education, the purpose of spirituality, the purpose of life, the purpose of yoga is to accelerate consciously the whole process of evolutionary journey and participating actively, dynamically, and rightfully. And this is where the prenatal education, I'm not talking about prenatal care, that is not my domain, it's education. So what kind of education we should bring in order to create a conscious humanity? In order to give birth to a conscious humanity, that's again was the very message of the ancient seers and sages. I'm sure you all must have heard the name Veda. Rig Veda, the ancient most text, sacred text, which records the realizations, experiences, thoughts, ideas, and whatever way the truth was visualized, was seen by the ancient seers and sages, are recorded in this text. So that's why in the matter of dharma, in the matter of anything, that is, that we relate to spirituality, this becomes the source text. So there a rishi says, what is the purpose of human life? And when we're talking about birthing the new humanity, what is that new humanity? What is newness in that? When we're talking about that new, are we old? Is the existence, the present existence is old, that we are seeking something new? Are we missing something? Yes. When we grow more and more conscious of ourselves, we can see that how much of that old we are carrying within. And our whole purpose should be constantly unfolding the new from the old. Not to remain old, but to unfold all that is new, all that is beautiful. This is where the education plays a maximum role, and the most important role. This constant unfoldment, and the Rishi says, Rishi means a seer, the one who has perceived the truth directly. That's why he is called Rishi, Sakshat Darshanam. That means he has seen the truth directly. He has heard the voice of the truth directly, because he has an inner vision, he has an inner audition, which the average man cannot do, the ordinary person cannot do. He has raised himself to a different level of consciousness, to a higher level of consciousness, and he operates from that higher level of consciousness. So he is called a Rishi. And he says, what he has seen, he expresses that. And what he says, the whole purpose, his message is Janaya Divyam Janam. I will explain you this most important key statement of the Rishi. He says, Janaya Divyam Janam. He says, create a divine population. Janaya, create. Divyam Janam, a population which is divine in its nature. That sets the goal for the entire humanity. That sets the goal for the entire prenatal education. That in our ordinary, in our average consciousness, we all fall into the instinct, the impulse of the animal. We carry much of the animal instinct in our consciousness when we are living in that narrow and the constricted animal consciousness. As long as we are led and guided and prompted and dictated by our lower vital nature, our greed, our lust, our anger, our jealousy, and all kinds of mean things. No, mark that so much of animality is ruling us. And that's not good. That way we cannot create. That way we cannot, that's not the real education, real purpose of life. So we must transcend that constricted, narrow consciousness, and we must expand, remain in an expanded consciousness. That's the purpose. And in that expanded consciousness, it is possible to see the truth. It is possible to understand what is the purpose of life. What is the real purpose of life? How should we organize our life's activities around that central truth of living in an expanded and vast, large consciousness, which is known as Brihat? So, transcending the animal, narrow, constricted consciousness and remaining aware of all that pulls us down and doesn't allow us to move ahead and work on those aspects strictly is the very purpose of our education and very purpose of our life, the very purpose of spirituality, yoga, and then culturing the self culture, we can say. So, this is where when we are talking about the prenatal education, I would like to read out a very important passage from the mother of Sri Aurobindo Ashram, whose original name was Mira Alfasa. She came here in 1914 and she became the spiritual partner of Sri Aurobindo and remained here in Pondicherry till the end of her life, that is till 1973. She never stepped out from 1920 to 1973 out of Pondicherry. And she did all, Sri Aurobindo put her in front, calling her the Divine Mother. So she says about, when she speaks about the human birth or creating the conscious humanity or creating that divine population or birthing the new humanity, so this one passage sets the whole program for all of us to understand it. I'll read out slowly and then we'll try to understand. If you have any question with regard to this, you are free to ask me. I will explain you. She says, the education of a human being should begin at birth. The education of a human being should begin at birth and continue throughout his life. It should not stop. It must begin at birth and it must continue throughout his life. Indeed, if we want this education to have its maximum result, it should begin even before birth. Mark this sentence, even before birth. That is what is the true education when we are talking about prenatal education. What kind of education that we should bring, I will discuss a little more about it. So let me read and then complete the passage. In this case, it is the mother herself who proceeds with this education by means of a twofold action. First, upon herself for her own improvement, and secondly, upon the child whom she is forming physically. For it is certain that the nature of the child to be born depends very much upon the mother who forms it, upon her aspiration and will. Mark these two words, we will discuss about it, upon her aspiration and will, as well as upon the material surroundings in which she lives. So, three things. She talks about the aspiration, she talks about the will, and she talks about the material surrounding, the material environment, the material atmosphere in which she lives. To see that her thoughts are always beautiful and pure, her feelings always noble and fine, her material surroundings as harmonious as possible, and full of a great simplicity. This is the part of education which should apply to the mother herself. And if she has, in addition, a conscious and definite will to form the child according to the highest ideal she can conceive, then the very best conditions will be realized so that the child can come into the world with his utmost potentialities. How many difficult efforts and useless complications would be avoided in this way. This is what she says. And it is not merely one passage, one quotation, but a whole program has been given to us what we should do in the name of birthing a new humanity. What kind of program we should create. So she says about aspiration. She says about will or definite will. She says about the environment. Though she speaks about the material environment, but in further passages, when we read her, the whole uh, concept that she has developed or what she has spoken, she also speaks about the psychological climate, the spiritual climate, the psycho, because mere material environment or material climate or physical climate, material surroundings, which is very much necessary, it has a lot of impact. But what matters most is the psychological climate. So that's where we come to the different layers of our existence. I will come back towards the end with regard to the aspiration and will, but let me talk about when we are talking about the existence and when we are talking about formation of a child, it is not merely birthing a child, is not merely to give birth to a physical body with a consciousness in it, pulsating consciousness in it or life in it. It is much more deep. That understanding we should have. So beyond the material existence, and this material existence, these are two extremities. One is the matter, one is the spirit. So without talking about the spirit, the supreme spirit, who is the source of all creation, merely talking about the material existence and merely talking about the physical care of the child, the physical body, we will not succeed much in our idea of birthing the new humanity. We should have a total understanding of the different layers of existence and then work out the program accordingly. Where the physical care will be a most important thing, work to be done, but that is not the. So beyond that, we have to have a deeper understanding of the different layers of existence. So this twofold existence, when we are talking about the birth, the physical birth of it, so it is just, we are talking about one aspect, the material aspect. But there are three more existence we need to understand. One is there is a material birth, a physical birth, there is a psychological birth, and there is a spiritual birth. So if all these three different birthing are not in harmony with each other, then the creation of conscious humanity will not be, that effective. At present, the world, whatever is happening in the name of prenatal, the whole idea of prenatal is that we are talking more about the physical, a little bit of emotional, or at some places, some people with all sincerity talk about the different levels, a little bit of emotional, spiritual, and psychological aspects. But it needs much deeper understanding, and more than understanding, the realization of those higher truths within oneself and translating those higher truths and realization into the dynamism of life. So that is what we need to keep in mind. So what do we mean by the physical birth, the psychological birth, and the spiritual birth? The physical birth, this body, there is a beautiful saying in the Gita. I'm sure that you all must have heard the name of Gita, which is the foundational scripture or the foundational sacred text of the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal truth, the Hindu Dharma, you can say. So the Gita says, what is this body? The whole purpose of giving birth, as I said, is to manifest the spirit in the matter. It is not merely giving birth to a physical, baby or the physical body. But how do we manifest that spirit into the matter, infuse that material existence with the spiritual truth, spiritual light, the spiritual wisdom, the spiritual force, the spirit itself taking hold of that material existence. So that is the purpose. And then in that purpose, so we have these three kinds of birth. One is the physical birth, the psychological birth, and the spiritual birth. So the psychological being or the spiritual being, how it gets formed is a deeper knowledge which has been given to us in almost all ancient uh, texts that we find in India. Whether you talk about the Vedas, you find that realization. You talk about the Upanishads, the Gita, and many other philosophical texts, even the Ayurvedic texts, also we find discussion about the psychological and spiritual world. But usually, when we try to understand, we understand man as the physical being. But what is this physical being? What is this physical body? So, in a deeper sense, this physical being is the soil, is the field, is the kshetra. So, the Sanskrit word, the original word which is used for this body, this material existence is kshetra. Kshetra means a field, the soil. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetramiti abhidhiyate. So that's what the Krishna says in the Gita. He says that this body is the kshetra, is the field. And in this field, our psychological and material existence and spiritual existence have to manifest. So therefore, it is very, very important how do we prepare this field? How do we prepare this soil? Because preparing the soil, when a man and woman they come together to give birth to a child with the purpose of giving birth to a child, so the whole purpose is not just some conjugal enjoyment and the child becomes the result of that. No. If that is the purpose, then we are no different from the animals. So the whole purpose is the man and woman come together with the purpose of preparing the soil, preparing the field, so then the spirit can manifest, take hold of it. And then one has to also be careful in not taking possession of that field. When a child is born, most of the times you say that, "Oh, it's my child. I have given birth to it." But in a deeper sense, that's again is not, should not be one of the aims or purposes of birthing the new humanity. How do we make ourselves free from this sense of possession? Because a soul or spirit has been invoked, invoked to take possession of that body. So it belongs. Who possesses that body? It belongs to that spirit. It belongs to that divine element. I am just a trustee who has been given that responsibility to take care of that. But I cannot possess that and own it, say that it's mine. So then there is a beautiful relationship bonding which will be formed between the child and the mother and the parents. Otherwise, it becomes a business. It's just a business. And that's what we see, we experience in our day-to-day life. That how do we treat our children, and then how we are treated by our own children. How each individual is treating other individual. Because of this lack of the deeper connection. It is just the whole world is dealing with projection with projection. There's no soul connection. And this is all business. And that's not the purpose of the new humanity that we are aspiring for. So, how do we become free from that sense of possession? So, the whole purpose must be manifesting. And there are many great spirits, many great souls who are waiting to manifest in this world for the sake of doing good to the world. And the man and woman, they must come with this aspiration, form this will, how they can manifest, invoke that soul, that spirit, so then it takes possession for the sake of doing good to the world. So in that sense, so for the manifestation of that spirit, the psychological climate, the spiritual climate we need to build. The parents have greater responsibility. In that case, the man and woman, they have a greater responsibility in order to carry this psychological and spiritual climate within environment within themselves. So what is needed is more awareness, more consciousness, more understanding of ourselves, understanding the world within, and understanding the world outside. So the inside contains the entire outside. This understanding of oneself, I am not just the body, I am not just my mind, even the mind, every level of our existence, when we look, it has layers and layers and layers. The human existence is a very, very complex existence. We need to understand the complexity, the relationship, have a deeper understanding of the different layers of our mind, have a deeper understanding of the different layers of our emotional and sensational being, have a deeper understanding of the physical itself. The physical is not just the body, it is also mixed up with the mental and the vital, the emotional and sensational being. It is not in isolation. Yet every part of our being has its own core consciousness which needs to be realized, brought into the front. But beyond this, there is what truly carries forward our evolution is our Atman, the Antaratman, the core aspect of our being, the inmost being, which is that divine spark within us. And in our evolutionary journey, that divine spark, through our education, through our sadhana, through our discipline, must turn out to become a full-fledged flame. From its spark, it becomes a flame. That's the whole journey. Then we have a total understanding of ourselves. And with that total understanding of ourselves, we understand the world outside. And then when we organize our lives activities around that deeper realization of what this divine spark is, and then how it turns out to become a full-fledged, that entity, that principle, that spark becomes a being, full-fledged being, full-fledged personality. So then when we think of the man and woman with this deeper understanding of themselves come together to give birth to a child, not for the sake of just having a child because we have married means we have to have a child, this is a social rule. No, but to extend their consciousness together. They harmonize themselves and bring out a harmonious, conscious expansion of their consciousness. That is why every child is called Santana. The Sanskrit word we use for the child is Santana. Santana doesn't mean a child. Santana means the expansion of the consciousness. The root meaning of, like, the child must become an expansion of my consciousness, the consciousness of the parents. So therefore it depends what kind of consciousness the parents carry, what kind of thoughts, what kind of emotions, what kind of psychological and spiritual climate and the material environment in which they live, because everything has an impact on the unborn child. So we need to understand the secret of the unborn child or the child in the womb, and then guide in its own journey by educating ourselves, and then help this child come out carrying that deeper consciousness of ours, and as an expression of that deeper and higher consciousness, not as a physical body. So I think the topic is truly vast, and then I can go on, you know,
Thank you so
talking
much.
about it. So looking at the time limit. So I stop here because we have to have some time for our question and answer. And then by 5:20, I have to close the thing, because immediately after that, I have another session. So
So
thank you
thank
for
you so
giving me this
much.
opportunity.
Thank you so
And
much for coming.
then this is open for
It's
questions.
so deep, and obviously the conversation is just beginning, but it can go on through our whole lifetime. We do have a question from Helene. How do you recommend we bridge the material, psychological, and spiritual with couples who are required or more often compelled through fear of time to follow a less natural process, like the fertilization in utero, and still no consciousness and soul connection?
See, it all comes by education. So how have we educated ourselves, or we are educating ourselves? So all our issues are rooted, all our problems, whether you call even the fertilization, infertilization, or anything related to the childbirth, all our problems, it's not, we cannot link it to one source, yet it is at the source, there is a problem of the consciousness. So it is always, advisable, it is always advised that we look at, we should have a deeper understanding of ourselves. We should, at any cost, at each level, we should try to live a conscious life with a deeper understanding of ourselves. That kind of education that we should bring. Then I think we will have some kind of tangible answer to the different uh, problems that we keep facing in the matter of the childbirth.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And we do have another question from Ali in Taiwan. And she's asking, can we find a balance in the physical and spiritual when people in general only see the physical?
Yeah. So the balance will come when we have this aspiration and the strong will to harmonize our different layers of our existence. We don't make that effort in harmonizing. So that's why life has ceased to become beautiful and harmonious.
Beautiful. Thank you.
The different parts of being, like, we need to understand the physical is not in isolation, as I said. So it is well connected with our mental existence and the vital existence, our emotional and sensational existence. So is the emotional and sensational have got the physical principles. Mind also has got the physical principles. They are all mixed up with each other. So we need to have an understanding of our physical existence, our emotional and sensational existence, and our mental existence, and that harmony can be established when all the three layers of our existence, they are ruled by our inmost being, which is the Antaratman,
That's
which
wonderful.
knows the truth, which knows the divine.
Thank you so much. And all this was written in the Vedas how many thousands of years ago?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. Well, thank you, Dr. Sampadananda ji, for your time, your sharing, your wisdom, your love, and for being part of this community. And I hope that our collaboration will continue for a long time. So please give our love collectively to the people in Puducherry and your center, beautiful center, and please share our pranams with them.
Okay. And Gary wanted to ask some question. I see on the chat box.
Who was this?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you had to leave us already.
Okay.
But
if we still have few minutes,
okay,
you can ask your question.
The topic of IVF came up, and I'd like to ask you a question. When my wife and I, many years ago, were trying to have a child, we actually stopped before that. And our belief is that that we firmly believe that we have choice, right? We choose throughout our life, but I believe from the spirit plane as well. So I believe I chose my parents, and I believe everyone chooses their parents. So if that's the case, then it sort of gives me a feeling of peace that we were not able to be parents, or my path leads me elsewhere in terms of children. Right? My specific question is, a friend of mine who has a daughter, she firmly believes that the child was born and the spirit came later, a few days later. Would you have some thoughts on those two?
Yeah. See, when we look at the ancient texts, what we find is there is no definite answer to when the spirit enters into the physical. Okay. So some texts, they say that after 3-4 months of conception, it comes. And most importantly, what happens, not even 3-4 months, even some texts, they say some spiritual masters also who have seen, who have that inner eye to see when it does. So it even takes after birth. So after 3-4 years or 5 years or 7 years. So it may decide, but till then what happens, the spirit presides over it. So it looks at whether it is conducive for it to take possession or not. So because it knows, it carries the memory of its past lives, the spirit knows it. So whatever is conducive for its the continuation of its own progress towards the fulfillment, then it decides and then enters or takes possession of it. but but there is no definite answer to it. So some texts, some masters, they say that it happens, say, within few months, but definitely not during the conception. That is also another school of thoughts which believes that it happens immediately at that moment of conception. So we cannot deny that also, but we cannot say that that is wholly true also.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. Wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So people are putting in the chat. Thank you so much for bestowing this wisdom upon us. And thank you. And lots of
Thank you all.
hands folded together. Thank you so much.